So, with the Steam Deck, there were some things I forgot about in my past videos that I didn't quite touch on. So, I've played, like I said before, a wide variety of games. So, there are a couple things that when I first, ordered it or before it got to me that I thought, and when I first got it in my hands, I thought would kind of be the case. And kind of turned out to not quite be the case, but were kind of adapted. So having used the Steam controller, let me actually bring that up as a contrast. So having used the Steam controller, I thought it would be like I would go to the Steam Deck and basically use it in a very similar fashion to the Steam controller. Like you've got the touchpad here that is your only option for like that right joystick. And that kind of turned out to not quite be the case. So I kind of actually use the Steam Deck in more of a hybrid fashion, especially where I could and where it was possible. Dear, dear, oh dear. Let me... So especially where that wasn't the case. So I kind of more used it in a hybrid fashion. So the Steam controller, you have that, so that's your only option. So you're kind of stuck with, the touchpad for any looking, no matter the controller scheme of the game. Whereas with the Steam Deck, you're not quite forced into that. So what I found in like various first-person games is a lot of times for like general moving around, like even Morrowind and Fallout New Vegas, I would generally use the joystick, the right joystick for looking around and moving around, just walking around generally. I would switch to the touchpad for that finer tuned control in order to look around. Hey, Discord, please. And so in some the reason why that was is because you could use the touchpad the whole time, but there's some cases where it just isn't as functional, especially when you're just kind of like wandering around and you don't have anything that you have to shoot. So you just use the joystick. When you want to do that fine-tuned stuff, you've got both the gyro and the touchpad. The caveat is that the touchpad only works in certain cases. So when you're trying to do slow movements and the game you're playing does not flip between controller and mouse and keyboard that easily or have hybrid support for it, the dead zone kind of kills your movement, so it becomes very, very choppy when it's trying to emulate that joystick in the same way that it would emulate looking with the mouse. So you run into that issue, so either you have to mess around with dead zone settings or just deal with it. So that's why I ended up using the joystick more. The other thing too is there are a fair number of games on my Steam Deck that are platformers, and so that right thumbstick and touchpad really are not required to be used for those games. So like Monster Sanctuary doesn't have like anything for looking around really that you need to worry about. Same deal with Blasphemous, which I haven't played as much on deck, but that's kind of what that is. So I've played a little bit of Kenshi on it, and the joystick works really well for moving the camera around and orienting, things like that. Even in KOTOR 2, I would end up like not really using the joystick as prolifically as I thought I would, because it's just like, okay, whatever. The touchpad. Because the joystick's right there, and KOTOR is really the kind of game that you don't need to have that fine-tuned control, because a lot of the buttons do the functions where you're switching between targets and things like that, so you're not really required to use the touchpad. The touchpad's really nice for those certain sections in KOTOR 2 where you have to scroll through text. That's where it really shines. So that's kind of where the hybrid functionality comes in. It's like when I'm going to play Morrowind, and even an OpenMW, which supports keyboard and mouse and controller at the same time very, very well, I can sit there and have that fine-tuned control with the mouse and then switch to the joystick for general looking around. So I'm not just stuck around with it. There are some games like Endless Sky, which is a free game and has a community layout that works really well on deck, that uses that right joystick for things other than controlling the mouse. So you control the mouse with the touchpad, and then the joystick is used for like joystick click will bring up the map, and then up and down on the joystick will zoom in and out. So up to zoom in, down to zoom out. And that's all that joystick is mapped to. So that stick right there is kind of like, okay, cool. The other thing too, as I've mentioned, is I kind of had Free Doom set up with flick stick as the setting. I haven't played around with it too much, but it's still a paradigm I'm kind of wrapping my head around, and that's what I'm working with. So again, coming from the Steam controller, I had a certain paradigm that I thought I was going to be working in and working with, because it's like, oh, this is so much better. And while it is, I end up falling into a more, because of how much control space the Steam Deck has, I find it adapting more to the game that I'm playing. So even though it has a lot of the standard controller things and some non-standard controller things, you end up it turns into a hybrid thing. And with the vast number of games that you have available to play on deck, it becomes much easier to make that hybrid functionality work. So the joystick works really well for that, like those certain games that support the joystick movement and like slight movements and further movements and higher movements, and then the touchpads will work in their certain cases. But you just kind of have to find the flow that works for you when you're playing your games and in your controller schemes. So I really can't say what to recommend for it if that's what you're looking for, but in my experience, that's what I came across. And you may be someone that may be used to like a regular controller with two joysticks, and you may go into doing it as joysticks at first. But I would recommend trying out the touchpad for a little bit and messing around with the gyro. Depending on the console you're coming from, you may not be used to gyro controls. So kind of experiment and see what works. Community layouts work really well out of the box, and some of the official layouts work really well. But if you start to kind of tweak with it, you'll really get a feel that you can play with.
If you enjoyed the video, then like, comment, subscribe, feed the algorithm, boost the video up, share this video with your friends. If you found it informative or you just want to chat, I've got plenty of places in the description, Discord, Guilded, and what have you. Check those out, and I will see you guys in the next one.